The night someone entered my room while I was sleeping was the night I stopped being the person I was before I moved into that building. I want to tell you about a witness, a man who stood in a county court in November 2023 and swore under oath that he had never entered my room without my knowledge or consent. I want to tell you what the access log for that building showed when my solicitor requested it. And I want to tell you what happened in that courtroom when those two things were placed side by side. Stay with me. Because the moment when a witness realizes the evidence contradicts his testimony in real time is something I have replayed in my head almost every day since it happened. My name is not important. I am 22 years old and I'm in the third year of a history degree at a university in the north of England. In September 2021, I was 18 years old and I moved into private student accommodation managed by a letting company whose sole director was a man called Terry. The building was a converted Victorian terrace on a residential street about 12 minutes walk from campus. 6 rooms across 3 floors. Shared kitchen, shared bathrooms, communal areas that smelled permanently of damp plaster and the specific cold of buildings that have never been properly insulated. I moved in on the 2nd of September. My dad drove me up from Wiltshire in a rented van. He is a secondary school PE teacher, my dad, a man who has spent 30 years making young people feel capable of things they thought they could not do. And when he left me on the pavement outside that building with my boxes and my bedding, he hugged me for longer than either of us expected and said, "Ring me if anything feels wrong." I said I would. I meant it as a polite reassurance. I did not know then how literally I would need to take it. The first problem appeared in week 2. The hot water in the shared bathroom on the 2nd floor cut out every morning between 7 and 7:40, exactly that window, every day. I mentioned it to the letting agent, a man called Darren, who handled all of the day-to-day management on Terry's behalf. Darren told me the boiler was old and it sometimes struggled in the mornings and I should shower before 7 or after 8. Week 3. A window in the kitchen that did not close properly. Cold air coming through the gap all night. I photographed it. I messaged Darren. He said he would look into it. The window was still not fixed when I left the building 14 months later. Week 4. The fire door on the ground floor corridor had a broken mechanism. It stayed permanently open, propped with a wedge of cardboard someone had jammed under it. I reported it to Darren on the 12th of September. He said he would arrange for it to be fixed. I noted it in a document I'd started keeping on my laptop because something about Darren's manner made me want to record. That habit saved me later. I want to stop here because I know what this sounds like so far. Broken windows, slow maintenance, an unresponsive letting agent. That is frustrating, but it is also common. Thousands of students across the country experience exactly this, and most of them just get through it and move on. I need you to understand that what I am describing in these early weeks was the foundation. The thing being built on top of it is what this story is actually about. The first time I knew something was seriously wrong was the 14th of October 2021. I came back to my room at around 9:30 in the evening after a seminar that had run late, and I found my desk chair had been moved. Not dramatically, just slightly. The kind of movement you would not notice unless you knew exactly where things had been. I noticed because I've always been particular about my space, a habit from a childhood bedroom I shared with my younger brother, where knowing where your things were was the only control you had. I stood in the doorway and looked at the chair and looked at the rest of the room, and nothing else seemed disturbed. And I told myself I had imagined it. I had not imagined it. The second time was the 28th of October. A book on my shelf had been replaced spine out. I had not done that. I noticed books. I stood in my room for a long time, and then I rang my dad. I told him what had happened, both incidents. He was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "Start taking photographs of your room every time you leave and every time you come back." I said, "That seemed excessive." He said, "Do it anyway." I did it from that day forward, every single time. The photographs saved the case. In November 2021, I reported the room access concerns to my university's student support service. They took a note and advised me to contact the accommodation office if I believed my license agreement was being breached. I contacted the accommodation office. They advised me to raise it with the letting agent. I had already raised it with the letting agent. Darren told me in an email dated the 4th of November 2021 that no member of staff had entered my room and that I was mistaken. I rang my dad that evening. He said he was going to drive up at the weekend. He drove up every weekend from that point until March 2022, 4 hours each way. He sat in the communal kitchen with me on Saturday mornings while I showed him the photographs and the emails and my maintenance log, and he helped me organize everything chronologically in a folder. He never once told me I was overreacting. He never once suggested I should just find somewhere else. He sat across a plastic kitchen table that was always slightly sticky no matter how many times it was cleaned, and he looked at my documentation and he said, "We are going to sort this properly." He was 53 years old and he gave up every weekend for 5 months to sit in a cold student kitchen in the north of England because his son was frightened. I want to say that clearly, so it is on record somewhere. In December 2021, I found my laptop had been moved. Not far, an inch, perhaps 2. But it had been on a specific mark on my desk that I had made by placing a piece of masking tape as a reference point, one of my dad's suggestions, and when I came back from my last lecture before the Christmas break, it was not on the mark. I photographed it immediately. I photographed the masking tape. I messaged Darren and told him I had evidence that my room had again been accessed without my consent. He said the photograph proved nothing and that I was becoming difficult. I left for home for Christmas carrying a level of anxiety that I did not have language for at 18. I had lost 7 pounds since September. I was sleeping badly, waking at 3 or 4, lying rigid in the dark, listening to sounds in the building. My mum noticed immediately. She took me to our GP on the 27th of December. The GP noted my presentation, asked about my living situation, and documented in my records that I was experiencing significant anxiety related to accommodation concerns. He referred me for counselling. The waiting list was 11 weeks. I went back to the building in January. What happened in February 2022 is the midpoint of this story and the point at which everything became significantly worse. On the 14th of February, at approximately 2:15 in the morning, I woke to the sound of my door handle turning. Not opening, just the handle depressing and releasing. I lay completely still, the handle depressed again, then nothing. I lay there until 6 in the morning when it was light enough outside that the darkness in my room had a different quality and I could make myself get up. I installed a small motion sensor camera on my bookshelf that afternoon. £8 from a website pointed at the door. I did not tell Darren, I did not tell Terry, I told my dad. The camera recorded 2 further door handle incidents in February, both after midnight, both without any entry being made. On the 4th of March 2022, at 11:47 at night, the camera recorded the door opening. A figure entered, spent approximately 40 seconds in the room and left. The footage was dark, but the shape was clear, and the building's internal lighting from the corridor was enough to make the moment of entry visible. Someone had entered my room at night. I sent the footage to my dad at 6 the following morning. He was in the car driving north by 7. He arrived at 10. We went together to the police station on the 11th of March. The officer who took my report was thorough and took the footage seriously and told me this was a matter that would be investigated. She also told me I should seek legal advice immediately. I instructed a solicitor named Priya on the 14th of March. Priya had 14 years of housing law experience, and she looked at the camera footage and the photograph log and the maintenance record and the medical documentation from my GP, and she said this is a harassment case under the Protection from Eviction Act 1977. She said it the way people say things when the answer is very clear and they have seen it before. Priya wrote to Terry on the 17th of March. She cited Section 1 of the 1977 Act, the camera footage, the documented pattern of access, and my GP records. She demanded that all access to my room cease immediately, that the outstanding maintenance items be addressed within 14 days, and that a full accounting of all access to the property since September 2021 be provided. Terry responded through his own solicitor. He denied all allegations. He denied that anyone had entered my room. He said the camera footage was inconclusive. He said I was a difficult tenant who had been causing disruption in the building. Difficult. Priya filed the claim in the county court in April 2022. The claim was for harassment under the 1977 Act, breach of the implied covenant of quiet enjoyment, damages for psychiatric harm supported by my GP records, and a claim connected to my deposit, which Terry had failed to register with the deposit protection scheme within the statutory 30-day period. The total claim was for £19,800. Now, here is what I withheld until now. During the disclosure process, Priya requested the electronic access log for the building. This was the log generated by the key fob system that controlled entry to the building's communal areas, and as it turned out, also recorded access to individual rooms via a master fob held by the management company. The log was a digital record. It had timestamps, it had fob identifiers. The log showed that Darren's master fob had accessed my room 7 times between October 2021 and March 2022, all between the hours of 10 p.m. and 3 a.m., all on dates that corresponded precisely to the incidents I had documented. 7 times. The hearing was in November 2023. Darren gave evidence. He stated under oath that he had never entered my room without my knowledge or consent, and that the allegation was false. Priya cross-examined him for 40 minutes. She put the access log in front of him line by line. She asked him to explain each of the 7 entries. He said the log must be incorrect. She asked whether a log generated automatically by a key fob system could be incorrect. He said he did not know how the system worked. The district judge, a woman called Frances, asked Darren directly whether he was maintaining his position that he had never accessed the room. He said yes. She looked at the log. She looked at him. She said she found his evidence to be wholly inconsistent with the documentary record, and that she preferred the evidence of the claimant in all material respects. The judgment was awarded in my favour. Damages of £17,400. Deposit compensation costs. Francis noted that the pattern of nocturnal access to a student's room by a letting agent constituted one of the most serious breaches of a tenant's right to quiet enjoyment she'd encountered in her time on the bench. I am still in counselling. I have been since March 2022. What happened in that building at 19 is something I have had to learn to carry rather than put down, which is a distinction my therapist drew for me that I have found useful and that I am still working on. My dad was in the public gallery for the judgment. He had taken a day off work. He sat in the back row in his coat because the courtroom was cold, the specific institutional cold of old buildings with high ceilings. And when Francis read out the award, I heard him exhale from across the room. That sound. My dad exhaling in a courtroom in November. I recorded it in my phone notes immediately, the way I used to photograph my room, because some things you want to have on record, somewhere permanent. Terry has appealed the judgment. The appeal is pending. The grounds are narrow, and Priya believes we will hold the finding, but narrow grounds are not no grounds, and I'm learning not to assume anything until it is done. Part 2 will cover the appeal hearing, what Terry's legal team argued about the access log, and what happened when Darren was asked to give evidence again in a higher court where the stakes were different and the questions were more precise. Subscribe if you want to know how it ends. And if you have ever lived in a building where something felt wrong and you could not name it and nobody believed you, I want you to know that the log exists. The record is always there. You just have to know to ask for it.